Now we move to the topic of project scope. Scope is one of the most critical aspects of project management because it defines what is included in the project and what is not. A well-defined scope ensures that the team has clarity about the deliverables, the boundaries, and the overall objectives. Without proper scope management, projects often face issues like scope creep, where additional work keeps getting added without proper control. In this section, we will explore how to define, manage, and control project scope to make sure the project stays aligned with its goals. This slide highlights the difference between product scope and project scope. Product scope refers to the deliverables of the product itself, meaning its features and functions, what the end product should look like, and what it should do. On the other hand, project scope is broader. It includes all the work the project team must perform to deliver that product. So, project scope encompasses product scope, as shown in the diagram. Simply put, product scope is about what the product is and project scope is about how we get it done. When we talk about product scope, we are essentially focusing on the features and functions that define a product or service. It outlines what the product will do and the characteristics it must have to meet customer needs. The way we achieve this can vary depending on the processes, tools, and techniques used in different application areas. Product scope is defined during the project life cycle and its completion is measured against the specific product requirements. It is also important to note that a product may consist of several subsidiary components, and each of these components can have its own independent scope, even though they all contribute to the overall product. We are essentially describing all the work that needs to be done in order to deliver a product. Unlike product scope, which is about the features of the product itself, project scope focuses on the activities, tasks, and processes required to bring that product to life. The processes, tools, and techniques used here are often similar across different application areas, and the scope is defined within the framework of project management. Completion of project scope is measured by how well it aligns with the project life cycle, and typically, a project is aimed at delivering a single product at the end. Plan scope management is all about setting a clear direction for how scope will be handled throughout the project. It is the process of creating a scope management plan that defines how both the product scope and the project scope will be established, validated, and controlled. This means we decide in advance how we will capture requirements, how we will confirm that the scope is correct, and how we will manage any changes that come along the way. Since it ensures that nothing is missed and everything stays aligned with objectives, plan scope management plays a critical role in the planning process group. This slide explains the flow of plan scope management by showing its inputs, processes, and outputs. To create a scope management plan, we start with inputs such as the overall project management plan, enterprise environmental factors, and organizational process assets. These inputs provide the foundation and context for how scope will be planned. The process of plan scope management is then carried out using tools and techniques like expert judgment, data analysis, and meetings, which help in making informed decisions. Finally, the outputs of this process are the scope management plan and the requirements management plan, which clearly guide how scope will be defined, validated, and controlled throughout the project. Collect requirements is the process where we focus on understanding what stakeholders actually need from the project. It involves determining, documenting, and managing all requirements so that the final product or service truly meets the objectives. To do this, we start with inputs like the project management plan, business documents, agreements, environmental factors, and organizational assets, which set the context for requirement gathering. The process then uses tools such as expert judgment, data gathering techniques, interpersonal skills, data analysis, and even prototypes to capture the needs accurately. Finally, the outputs of this process are requirement documentation and a requirements traceability matrix, which ensure that every stakeholder need is properly recorded, tracked, and fulfilled throughout the project. When we talk about collecting requirements, there are several tools and techniques that help us understand stakeholder needs clearly. Brainstorming and interviews allow us to gather ideas directly, while focus groups and surveys help in getting feedback from multiple people. Techniques like benchmarking and voting guide us in identifying best practices and preferences. Multi-criteria decision analysis and affinity diagrams are useful to organize and prioritize requirements. Creative tools such as mind maps and prototypes allow us to visualize concepts, and observation helps us see how processes work in reality. Facilitation and nominal group techniques ensure that everyone's input is heard in a structured way, while affinity diagrams are a technique used to organize ideas that are generated from other requirement gathering methods. The main purpose is to group similar ideas together so that patterns and connections can be identified. Once the ideas are grouped, each group is given a title or a subheader, which makes it easier to understand and categorize the requirements. This method not only simplifies large amounts of information, but also helps in identifying additional areas of scope that might otherwise go unnoticed. Overall, affinity diagrams are very useful in bringing clarity and structure when we are dealing with a wide range of ideas. A mind map is a very effective tool to organize and visualize ideas. It is basically a diagram where thoughts or notes are arranged around a central word or concept. From that central idea, branches expand outwards to show related topics, tasks, or details. This method is very useful because it helps in generating new ideas, classifying information, and recording it in a structured way. By visually connecting concepts, a mind map gives us clarity and makes even complex information easy to understand and remember. A requirement traceability matrix, or RTM, is a tool used to ensure that all project requirements are properly covered throughout the development process. It links each requirement with design, coding, system testing, and acceptance testing so we can verify that nothing is missed. This helps us track whether every requirement mentioned in the scope is delivered, tested, and validated. In simple terms, the RTM acts as a checklist to make sure that requirements are aligned with the final deliverables. Tools like Define Scope is the process of creating a detailed description of the project and the product. It belongs to the planning process group. In this step, we take inputs such as the project management plan, project documents, project charter, enterprise environmental factors, and organizational process assets. Using tools like expert judgment, product analysis, data analysis, and decision-making, we define the exact boundaries of the project. The main outputs of this process are the project scope statement and updates to project documents. In simple terms, this process ensures clarity on what is included in the project and what is not, so the team and stakeholders have a common understanding. Validate Scope is the process of formalizing the acceptance of completed project deliverables. It belongs to the monitoring and controlling process group. In this process, we use inputs such as the project management plan, project documents, verified deliverables, and work performance data. The main tools applied are inspection and decision-making, which help to confirm whether the deliverables meet the defined requirements. The outputs of this process include updates to project documents, change requests, accepted deliverables, and work performance information. In simple words, Validate Scope ensures that stakeholders formally agree and sign off on the completed deliverables, which reduces misunderstandings later in the project. Control Scope is about monitoring and managing the status of the project and product scope so that the project stays aligned with the defined scope baseline. It uses inputs like the project management plan, project documents, organizational process assets, and work performance data. Through data analysis, it identifies any gaps or deviations, and the outputs include work performance information, change requests, and necessary updates to the project management plan and documents. In simple terms, it ensures the project does not expand beyond agreed boundaries and that any changes are handled in a controlled way. Work Breakdown Structure, or WBS, is a visual tool that breaks the entire scope of a project into smaller, manageable deliverables called work packages. By doing this, it ensures that nothing important is missed and every deliverable is accounted for. WBS gives a structured view of the project, which helps in planning, scheduling, estimating, resource allocation, and controlling quality and risks. In short, it provides clarity and structure so the project runs smoothly without overlooking any critical part. Creating a work breakdown structure is the process of dividing the project scope into smaller, manageable components called work packages. The inputs for this process include the project management plan, project documents, organizational process assets, and enterprise environmental factors. Using techniques like decomposition and expert judgment, the WBS is developed. The main outputs of this process are the scope baseline and updates to project documents. In simple terms, creating a WBS ensures clarity and structure so that every part of the project is well defined and nothing is left out. A work breakdown structure makes sure no deliverables are missed by breaking the project into smaller work packages with team and stakeholder input. This involvement builds buy-in and improves performance, while also making the project easier and less risky to execute. WBS helps people clearly understand the project, provides a complete hierarchy of deliverables, and makes the work feel more achievable by showing how each part connects to another.